Hey Gooners, welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all well. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Hope you've recovered from what was a bit of a boring game last night. I got to be honest. Obviously we got the desired result, made 9 changes and still looked very, very comfortable, progress through to the next round of the Carabao Cup where we're going to meet Brighton and Hove Albion. Not the worst draw we could have got, but certainly not an easy one either. You think about how many times in recent years Brighton have come to Emirates Stadium and made life very, very difficult for us. That does give me a little bit of anxiety. But, this is a competition that we really do have the ability to kind of push on in and go far in. I mean, we made the semi-finals of the competition last year and we were second best against Newcastle, who went on eventually to win it. We play Newcastle at the weekend in the Premier League, and from tomorrow we'll be building up to that game in a lot of detail. But as far as the Carabao Cup goes, there's an opportunity to go far, and you need a bit of luck and you need a bit of the rub of the green with the draw. So yeah, pleased overall with the fact that we've progressed. Not massively pleased by the performance, but then I started to think about it and I was like, do I need to be pleased by the performance at this stage in the competition? Does the fact that we've made 9 changes, and I know we've got a much better squad nowadays, and so when you make those 9 changes, the team still looks much healthier than it would have done in the past. But does that not mean that there is going to be a sort of a disjointed display? Does it not mean that, we're going to have new players playing in different positions, playing with each other for the first, second, third time, maybe in some instances, new combinations and all the rest of it? Is that not going to by default mean that Arsenal are just less fluid than they normally are? Now, people will push back on me and they'll say, yeah, but we haven't been fluid enough all season. And to a point, I get that. I do. I've been frustrated by some of the displays. I've been frustrated by some of the performances, but I just think in a game like last night's, where you're clearly the favourites, you're clearly the superior outfit, and as a pro, as much as we say, you go to a place like Port Vale, the English pyramid is very strong, you take these games seriously, of course you do, but you'll also know that you can probably get through this game and through this tie, even in second gear. And you probably won't have to shift much beyond second gear at any point, really, as long as you do the basics right to win the game. And that's what it was last night for Arsenal. Like, there were some positives to take away from it. And we'll come on to discuss those and break those down a little bit later on in the pod. But it was just one of those games that I just want to sweep it under the carpet and move on. And I know there'll be people that were super angry after the Man City game because of the way that we approached it. And then post that game, this narrative of the handbrake being on has developed. And as we move forward, people that kind of really bought into that and jumped on that bandwagon essentially are going to look for every single reason to kind of bring that up again. And when you go to Port Vale and you don't create as much as we'd have liked, and you don't put the game to bed as early as we'd have liked, then there will be that conversation again, and there will be that noise. And listen, that's just par for the course. We got to take that. We got to understand it. But I think it's important that you realize that as a Premier League player, as someone who was just playing in the Champions League a few days ago, to turn up at somewhere like Port Vale, okay, you need to pay respect to the opponent, but you'll also know deep down that if you are only in second gear, if you're only at 60%, you probably still win the game. And why exert yourselves? For a long time, Mikel's been criticised of kind of running players into the ground and overplaying them and working them at times when they didn't need to be worked. And that has, in the longer term, led to them picking up quite serious injuries and injuries that have cost us. But he made 9 changes last night. I don't know really what more you could ask for. Could he have made 11 changes? Maybe. But you've still got to maintain that level of quality, because you want to build a bit of momentum. You want to build a bit of a head of steam. Now, Arsenal go to Newcastle on Sunday in the Premier League, which is a very difficult game, obviously. But after that, you look at Arsenal's run of fixtures and you start to think, well, this is the point in the season now, after a really difficult and tricky start. Having navigated through that, now we can, start to build a little bit of momentum, be a little bit braver in our approach. And that brings me on quite nicely, actually, to last night's team selection, because lots of us were predicting the team. Lots of us were talking about the players we'd like to see play, given the opportunities, etc., etc. Mikel, as I say, made those wholesale changes, and I'll just run you through the team. It was Kepa in goal. It was White back in at right back. Saliba and Mosquera were the two central defenders. Lewis Skelly came in to replace Calafiori. In the midfield, it was Norgard at the base. It was Nwaneri to the right, and it was Eze to the left. Now, going into the game, looking at the team when the lineup came out, and I think that was a lot to do with the way that it was kind of sort of listed by many outlets last night. The assumption was that Gabriel Martinelli, who's been coming off the bench and having a real impact through the middle of the park, was going to play at centre forward. That wasn't the case. Mikel Merino went in there. Martinelli played from the left, and Bukayo Saka started from the right-hand side. Now, I had some thoughts on the team selection going into the game. First of all, I really wanted to see Max Dowman start, so I was disappointed when he wasn't in the 11. I understand why Mikel did what he did. He prioritized the rebuilding, if you like, of Bukayo Saka's fitness in the hope that he can really help and support us going up to Newcastle. And that's obviously even more important now with the absence of Noni Madueke. So Mikel prioritized that over giving Max Dowman a start. However, the plan was always to get Saka off after about the hour mark. And thank God he did, because he took a really heavy kick just before he came off. He was limping for a couple of minutes in between that incident and then actually being withdrawn. So I think we were all delighted to see him come off. But it meant that Max Dowman got about half an hour or so in the game. And listen, Max Dowman didn't win a penalty, which is what he normally does when he plays for Arsenal. He didn't score a goal or create a goal, but he did create a couple of really great moments for Arsenal. That unbelievable flick that he played into Declan Rice off the touchline was just beautiful to see. There was the first time ball in behind that released Victor Gyökeres into a shooting position. Again, brilliant vision and execution from Max Dowman. And he looked really neat and tidy. And I think that, you know, we forget sometimes that this guy's just 15 years old. And all of these experiences, as insignificant as they might feel for us and to us as supporters, because we'd say it's Port Vale, League One side, not really going to test him, not really going to cause him any problems. Him coming on and even doing 2 or 3 really bright things, they're going to build his confidence, and they're also going to build the confidence in him from those that are playing with him. And that is going to give people that extra encouragement to give him the ball. I mean, these guys watch him in training every day, right? They know exactly how good this kid is. You always feel that kind of caution around him, and you always take that cautious approach, I think, as a fan, as a colleague, as a coach, because of how young he is. But sometimes, as we were saying on the pod yesterday, the talent is just too damn good to keep a lid on. And that was certainly the case again with Max Dowman yesterday when he came on. He just looked, I won't even say like he was at home. He looked a level above. And he looked a level above some of our more senior players as well, which tells you that he really does belong in the first team. So Saka played from the beginning. And as I say, he came off after taking a bit of a kick. If that 60 minutes is going to make him sharper, fitter, and put him in a much better position when we go to St. James's Park on Sunday, then fine. It was the right decision. But you always carry that risk, don't you? You know, and if you're Mikel Arteta, who was largely blamed, by the way, for Bukayo Saka doing his hamstring the way he did last season, and then for the problem that he's had to deal with at the start of this season, because a lot of people will tell you that Saka's just played too much football over the last few years. And it's caught up with him, and it's put him in a position where he's in the red. And as a result, he's picking up these injuries. There's always going to be a lot of scrutiny on the way that Mikel manages Bukayo specifically. And because he's such an important player, sometimes you have to take that safety first approach. And we have the depth nowadays that we didn't have previously to be able to cope with him being out, or to cope with him playing less minutes, whatever that looks like, whether that's 60 from the start or 30 at the end, however that looks. Norgard was in the midfield, which was nice to see, because obviously we signed Christian Norgard in the summer, and there was a lot of question marks around whether that was a good signing or not. When the price came to light, I think a lot of people went, this is a Premier League captain and we're getting him for about 10 million quid. How can this not be a good signing? Me personally, I wasn't sure. Okay, I'll hold my hands up. Same as with Noni, you know, I wasn't sure that it was the right thing for us to be doing. Again, that was with the backdrop of us having not done our priority business yet. I never felt that the Norgard signing was going to get in the way of that, in the way that I did with the Madueke one, by the way, because the fee was so low. So there was never really any danger that was going to kind of reduce our ability to go and get our primary targets. But he came in yesterday and I thought he brought a nice balance to the midfield. And we needed that balance because Mikel, went with a really kind of attacking pair either side of him. Ethan Nwaneri is not an 8 for me. Eberechi Eze is not really an 8 either. Both of those guys want to get up the pitch. Both of those guys want to be in those pockets. They want to pop up in those half spaces. They want to get into central areas as early as possible because they both quite enjoy a shot at goal from outside the penalty box. So, again, the level of the opposition was lower. And so Mikel probably felt more comfortable in going with that sort of more offensive approach in midfield. He did it against Nottingham Forest as well. So you got to give him sort of credit for that. But in the bigger games, he's still reluctant to do that. And the more I think about it, the more I'm not going to say I'm okay with it or that I would do it, but the more I understand the reasons behind it. Like, the more I look back on the City game and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, we completely bloody controlled the game in so many aspects. But rather than talking about being dominant all the time, rather than talking about our defensive solidity, which we did show for most of the game against City, apart from that one counter-attack we got caught out on. Instead of talking about all that stuff, which Mikel Arteta does, and it does become a bit irritating because for me, when he keeps going on about dominance, control, I mean, I wonder what CEOs and presidents rang him up last night to say, I can't believe he did that to Port Vale. I'm joking before people get funny. But the thing that you don't talk about, Mikel, and the thing that I'm getting a little bit irritated by is that you refuse to acknowledge, or maybe not refuse to acknowledge, maybe that's going a bit too far, but you don't highlight enough the lack of efficiency. Because with that greater efficiency, all the things that you are talking up, would be kind of really valued. And people would look at those things and say, well, that's the platform. The fact that we do have this control, this dominance of possession, etc., that is what gives us the platform to go on and win the games. The efficiency is the difference between winning them and not winning them. There is a lack of efficiency at the moment. I mean, even like Noni Madueke, who I think's had a really good, lively start to life at Arsenal. How many goals and assists has he got? This was pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago. And, I'd not really looked at it like that, but it's true. And it's not all about numbers. For instance, I thought after Forest, he was easily the best player on the pitch and easily deserved to be man of the match. But Zubimendi got it because he'd scored 2 goals. So, the eye test is one thing, but you do need to provide tangible numbers as well. And I think that just playing more of those creatives and more of those technicians, you're naturally going to get there, aren't you? But the midfield was different in terms of its dynamic, in terms of its shape. It was a lot more like the midfield we saw against Forest. Not identical, because I would argue that Eze is more attack-minded than Merino. Merino and Rice are the two balancing players, I think. When you want to go for that more offensive approach, you need either Merino or you need Rice. I think playing both of them is what is kind of hampering us in terms of just having that little bit more creativity and spark. But yeah, it's an interesting debate and a conversation for another day, I suppose, because it's quite a deep one and we could easily go down a very deep rabbit hole here. But I thought as a result of the midfield that Mikel picked, it meant that Ethan Nwaneri's role was quite different. He seemed to play a lot more like Martin Odegaard yesterday than he did Ethan Nwaneri, in that he was dropping much deeper to get on the ball. He was sort of receiving it, turning it and popping it off nice and quickly. When the space opened up in front of him, he would go on a dribble. He would go on a bit of a roam, which was good to see. But it wasn't the, I'm going to play on the edge of the opposition's box at all times, Ethan Nwaneri type performance that we've seen more recently from him. It was a much more Martin Odegaard-like display. And was that an instruction? I'd imagine it was. I'd imagine that Arsenal have looked at the midfield and I'd imagine that they feel like Odegaard's absence is a big problem and a big reason as to why they're struggling to find that balance. And so to put him in a role whereby he can mirror a little bit more of what Odegaard does, that should restore a little bit of balance to us. Now, it's difficult to judge it in a game against Port Vale, with all due respect, but I think that was the intention when watching Ethan Nwaneri's game last night. Eze got his first goal for the club to open the account. Really nicely, well-worked move from Arsenal. Worked it out to the left-hand side. Martinelli played it infield. Lewis Skelly, I think, went to flick it on, but I don't think he actually made contact with the ball. And it comes to Eze, and it's a lovely reshaping of the body at the last minute to kind of produce that side foot finish low and into the far corner. He would have waited for that moment for many, many years, Eberechi Eze. He's a big Arsenal fan. He loves the club. He's finally arrived back at the club after being released as a youngster, and he's got his first goal. Now, was it the most glamorous of first goals in terms of who it was up against, the occasion, and all the rest of it? No. But actually, sometimes you don't mind that. You just want to get off the mark. You just want to open your account because it takes that pressure away, doesn't it? We keep talking about Gyökeres and the pressure that's on him at the moment. And I keep saying, yeah, but he's got goals, and he's got goals in the bag, which means that pressure, it can always be rebuffed because of how many goals he's got sort of in the bag. I know it's not a massive amount, but 3 in 5 Premier League games is a pretty good amount and a decent return. It's a return that most people would be proud of. So with Eze now, he goes to Newcastle at the weekend with that monkey essentially off his back of, when is he going to score his first Arsenal goal? He's done it. So that was really, really positive to see. Mikel spoke after the game about Eze just needing to work a few things out, just needing to understand the timing of some of the others around him. And I thought that was true because I think what we've seen from Eze since he's arrived at Arsenal is we've seen flashes of brilliance, but not consistent brilliance. And I'm not sure that you're going to always get consistent brilliance out of anybody, to be honest with you. But I do feel like there's more to come from Eze, and it's just about finding his feet at the football club. Leandro Trossard obviously came off the bench and scored the goal that took the game away from Port Vale. He is the definition, isn't he, of what Mikel would call a finisher. Comes off the bench, looks really sharp, looks really tidy, wonderful bit of control, cuts inside, and it's a great finish. I've always said that Trossard, for me, is one of the best finishers at Arsenal, if not the best finisher at Arsenal Football Club, and he showed that again. Players, I suppose, don't want to be labelled as impact subs, and I suppose that's the case for both Martinelli and Trossard right now, but both of them are having much bigger impacts in football matches when they're coming off the bench. And let me tell you this, if Arsenal do go on to win silverware this season, and those two continue to come off the bench and contribute the way that they have in the past couple of weeks, they're not going to be remembered any less than anybody else that was a part of the squad. So I think they need to kind of embrace that role a little bit because they are capable of coming on and really kind of swinging games in your favor. But as starters, I'm just not sure about either of them. And again, you look at Martinelli yesterday, who started the game, nowhere near as effective. When he comes off the bench, he's like an explosion of energy and he makes things happen. So I think those guys, they might not be entirely satisfied with that role, but I feel like, they kind of got to embrace it to a point. Just on the game overall, I'm just looking at my notes that I made on my phone last night. I don't think there's anything really too significant that I haven't covered off yet. It was a bit boring. It was a bit dull. It was a tough watch along to do, let's put it that way. But ultimately, we got the job done. And you see the discourse after the game again, and it's people complaining about the performance and all the rest of it. And I just think at some point, you've got to just go, it's job done and move on. That football's a long season, Football seasons are long, is what I should have said there. Terrible grammar from me. But, if you play 60 odd games in a season, which we will easily do, by the way, you're not going to be entertained in every single one of them. So as long as you get the result, you should be able to, I think, move on pretty quickly from the performance. Now, sometimes you see sort of common things in a performance that you worry in the bigger moments are going to bite you in the backside and are going to leave you short and leave you vulnerable. And I totally accept that and I totally agree with that. But I just think, if you want to analyze the Man City game the way it's been analyzed, that's fine. If you want to analyze the game at Old Trafford on the opening weekend, that's fine. If you want to analyze the game against Liverpool at Anfield, that is also fine. Analyze those games in the way that you feel comfortable, because clearly there is some validity to a lot of the points that were being made off the back of those games. But in a game where you make 9 changes You're playing against lower level opposition, so naturally the level comes down, I think, even subconsciously. And I know a coach's job, and he'll do his utmost to try and maintain that high level of performance, but it's not always easy because mentally there's another issue that you're dealing with. But I just think in yesterday's example, in last night's example, I don't think we need to overanalyze. I don't think we need to go into the performance itself and all the metrics that people point to these days. I don't think we need to go into that too deeply. I think it was Arsenal in second gear, getting through, making their way into the next round of the cup, and that's what we should be focused on now. Is parking that one, moving on to Sunday. We got a great chance of progressing even further by beating Brighton in the next round, which, as I said at the top, it's not the ideal draw. But it's not the worst one we could have got either. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to draw a line under this game, and I want to turn our attention now to Newcastle, because I think that is very, very important, and it's going to be a much bigger and much more difficult challenge. So let's hope that we can respond up at St James's Park and hopefully take all 3 points from the Northeast. It won't be easy, but as I say, we'll be building up to that game on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast in the next couple of days. Don't forget, if you're with us on YouTube, leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Check us out on Patreon, where you can get ad-free access to all of our episodes, as well as some exclusive content. Now, we normally do a bit of video analysis on whatever game it is that we play. I watched the game back Brighton early this morning, and honestly, there is nothing to analyze. We're not going to leave you, though, without any Patreon content. So we're going to bring you a piece on Eberechi Eze's start to life at Arsenal. That'll be with you guys later on in the day. I've got a really, really busy morning, but we'll get that out to you a little bit later on this afternoon. So look forward to hearing you guys' thoughts on that. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, as I say, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Arsenal through to the next round of the League Cup. Does it need over analysis, that one? I don't think so. I'll see you all soon. Until the next time, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.